everyone, welcome to another 3 palettes, 3 looks video. Today I'm going to be doing looks with Arttitude's Arcana palette, Dieverune Dewdrops palette, and also Gourmande Girls Mocha Moment. And in case you're new here, my name is Noopur and I love indie makeup and all things color and sparkle, and thank you so much for clicking on this video. As always, I would really appreciate it if you could give the video a like and consider subscribing if you aren't already subscribed. And also, I like to mention that in my 3 palettes, 3 looks video, I use these as an opportunity to feature palettes that I have not done dedicated overview videos for. So in addition to the looks that I'll be creating, I will be showing you swatches and also just talking through my overall thoughts on the palette and kind of analyzing them, if you will. Just a couple of notes before we get into the looks. The first one being that I did receive all 3 of these palettes in PR and I have codes of the brands, so that information will be in the description box below. And then the second note is that I've had this base makeup on for a couple of hours now because I sat down to film earlier and then I pretty much immediately heard some landscapers outside that would fully disrupt the audio because they are almost directly outside this window that is right behind my camera. And then while I was waiting for them to leave, I took my dog for a walk and I got a little sweaty, so I feel like I'm a little extra glowy. And if the base looks a little bit off in the close-up look with Mocha Moment, that is why. So this look is using the Arcana palette from Arttitude Cosmetics, and this is just such a cool-toned, muted dream of a palette. Not what we usually see in the summertime, but I do think it's really, really pretty, and I am being called to some of these teal tones down here, so I think I want to do a bold teal smoky eye. And I'm going to start by picking up this muted shade over here first. So since I've already done the other eye, I can tell you that these mattes are very pigmented, and when you dip your brush into the palette, there is a good amount of kick up in the pan, but a lot of pigment also comes off onto the brush, and I actually tapped off quite a bit of it before going in with it right now, just to show you that you can build it in very light layers if you want to, but you definitely can just go in with that, large amount of pigment if you want to. It's just not my style. Now I picked up a little bit more and I'm doing the same thing. I really like to focus it into the deepest part of my crease because I have quite deep set eyes, and I feel like when I'm blending, unless I'm looking straight down, it's really hard to get pigment right in there, and so sometimes I raise my eyebrows like this just to deposit it, but I don't like to blend like that because it can definitely skew how the eyeshadow appears once you relax your eyes. One more dip, and this time I'm going to start over here in the outer corner area. I'm going to do a darker matte on the lid itself underneath the shimmer, so I don't want to take too much dark shadow out here in the outer corner, which is why I'm putting this transition shade in the outer corner area. And now I'm just going to work on my blend over here, just make it a little bit more diffused. I'm sorry, I am still getting over being sick and my throat is just a little dry, and so it makes it sometimes hard to talk. Picked up the same shade on a smaller brush, and this time I'm going to focus it on the outer half of my lower lash line at first. Then I'm going to slowly drag it upwards at an angle to meet the shadow that I placed up here. Now I'm going to pick up this brighter teal matte over here on a loose, fluffy brush. I'm going to start applying it on the inner half of my lid, and I want a relatively light, not quite sheer, but just a light layer of this matte, which is why I took it on such a loose, fluffy brush. And it is a little difficult to get into the innermost corner over here, but that's okay because I don't want too much pigment there anyway. Now I'm going to pick up this deeper teal matte on a more detailed blending brush. I really picked up a lot of pigment this time, and I am packing this on the outer half of my lid itself. And then once I get the bulk of the pigment on, I'm going to start feathering it inwards, just kind of diffusing it into the other teal shade, and then also kind of blending it just a little bit outwards. And this is why I wanted more of a detailed blending brush, because I didn't want this to get out of control in the outer corner. And also working it into the crease a little bit. Just the tiniest amount. I don't want it to travel too far up. Now I'm going to grab this gorgeous teal shimmer on my finger like this. It is so vibrant and beautiful. I'm really excited to get this on my eyes. I'm going to be applying this to most of my lid. It is so gorgeous on. It's liquid chrome almost. But I am going to leave a tiny gap right here in the innermost portion of the lid. Just gonna use a brush to kind of do some detail work over here close to the crease. I feel like the shimmer would have been just as beautiful without putting any mattes underneath it, but I really wanted to boost that teal leaning shimmer and make it really, really vibrant. And I'm just gonna feather it off as I get into the inner portion. Next, I'm dipping into this iridescent shimmer over here. I'm applying the shimmer on the remaining portion of my lid, and the shimmer is so interesting because it is this like icy white straight on, but at an angle it shifts to a teal. So I felt like it could bring some brightness in this inner corner area to keep things from being too heavy, but also blend really, really well into the rest of the lid, which is why I am feathering it into the teal shade as I get to this section. Both of these shimmers applied really well over the mattes I put on my lid, and I feel like that's because these shimmers do have like a little bit of emollients to them. They're not super, super emollient because I feel like in past palettes from Arttitude, some of the shimmers were almost a little bit like oily, but they have improved over time, and these shimmers are by far the best that they've had. I wouldn't call them dry by any means, but they're just like not too creamy, but they have like enough emollients to them to stick down on top of mattes, if that makes sense. I just realized that I forgot to finish off my lower lash line, so I'm going to dip back into this deep teal over here. I'm just smudging it along the very outermost portion of my lower lash line and tapping it up into this area to connect things. Something that I really like about this shade is that even though I am building it, at least in this area, on top of that desaturated shade, and even though it's quite dark and deep and it's on my lower lash line where some shadow is like naturally cast, it still retains that teal hue. It doesn't look just like vague smokiness. Like I feel like it really does look teal, which I feel like is kind of hard to do on my skin tone. So Arttitude also released these 5 single shadows alongside the Arcana palette, and I'm actually going to dip into this one up here for my inner corner. This is the shade Ethereal, and it is definitely my favorite of the 5 singles that were released. It's got the most beautiful electric blue sparkle on a sheer tan base, and at least on my skin tone, the base is sheer enough and light enough to where this works really well as like an inner corner shadow without giving me a cast. Here's the final look with the rest of my makeup on. Per usual, all of the details for like the rest of my face will be in the description box, and I'm very happy with how this turned out. I feel like it's been a minute since I've done like a teal smoky eye, and I hesitate to use the word obsessed, but I really am obsessed with the color teal. I think it's just so pretty, and I really love this look. Now it's time for Sparkle Cam, which I love showing you guys so you can see all of the shifts and the texture, and I think you can see the shimmer that I put on my lid is teal straight on, more of a true blue at this angle, and then kind of like a purple almost at this angle, which it is so shifty, it's so beautiful. The shimmer in the inner portion of my lid as well, I love that you can see that it's pulling a little bit teal at an angle as well, which makes it flow so well into the shimmer. And then the blue in my inner swoop over there is so sparkly. I feel like it's the most sparkly of all 3 of the shimmers, and I feel like it just adds a little bit extra pizzazz to the look. So now let's talk about the Arcana palette as a whole really quickly. This was the official summer launch from Arttitude Cosmetics, and this is quite a unique color story for summertime at least, and it is a unique color story like just in general. I feel like I don't have any palette that comes close to this in my collection, but especially for summertime where we see so many bright, saturated colors, I feel like it's not often we see such a muted, cool toned palette, but I think it helps it stand out amongst all the summer releases this year, and it's a bit of a reprieve from them too. And before I continue talking about Arcana, I do want to show you it next to Metamorph, which is also from Arttitude, because I did get a couple questions asking how similar it was, and I think you can see even just like holding them up side by side. Metamorph is a lot brighter and has more like punchy colors. There are a few muted tones, but overall it feels more saturated, while Arcana feels like even more cool toned and muted. And I'll also pop up some swatches on screen so you can compare those and see what it looks like when swatched out. I also quickly want to note that Arcana is a magnetic palette while Metamorph is not. Arttitude only started doing magnetic palettes with the restock of Ink and Roses, which came out before this palette, and now this one, and I think hopefully the future palettes will also be magnetic, but the older ones are not. Okay, I feel like I didn't talk too much about the matte formula during the application. I did mention that it can be a buildable formula if you want, but you can also go in with like full pigment, and I really appreciate that versatility in the mattes. I do feel like these are a touch different from previous palettes, like in a good way. I feel like the mattes have been improved, and I haven't like gotten any confirmation about that from the brand itself, but just based on usage and swatching and things like that, these feel just like creamier, and they were like really nice to work with. I do like the assortment of matte shades in the palette, and if you know me, you know that I'm not the biggest fan of beige mattes and palettes. I just feel like they're not that useful for my skin tone at least, but I'm happy with the rest of the mattes, and per usual, I'm really happy to see that there are multiple depth options as well. When it comes to the shimmers, I feel like they have also improved from previous palettes because these feel less like emollient than past shimmers, and like I mentioned in the tutorial portion, they aren't dry at all. They do have some like creaminess to them, but I feel like previous shimmers felt a little like soft in the pan, and I didn't find that to be the case with these shimmers. Also, none of these shimmers are flaky. All of them have like a medium to small particle size and are very smooth, which I love to see. I feel like a lot of shimmers in their older palettes tended to be a bit more on the larger particle side to like kind of flaky, which wasn't my favorite formula from them. I also want to note that Arttitude has made the shift to doing less special shimmers in their palette, and just like less shimmers overall, you can see that there are only 6 shimmers in this palette, and I feel like the previous 3 palettes before this one also all had 6 shimmers, and not all of them were like shifty or special multi-chromes or anything like that. That being said, I feel like these shimmers are still really beautiful. I don't find them to be like lacking in any way, even if they aren't the most like crazy multi-chromes. There is one slight exception to that, and it's this shimmer over here. It is quite shifty. I believe it probably is a multi-chrome, but it's a bit more of that like frosted light bulb effect, as I like to call it, where it's more glowy than it is obviously sparkly. I do still appreciate shimmers like that, but I just want to note that it's not as sparkly as the rest of the shades. But then on the flip side, this shimmer over here is just like a standard shimmer. It's not a duochrome or multi-chrome or anything, but it is bonkers sparkly. It has that like diamond-like twinkle in it, and it's so beautiful. If you want just like a simple neutral but special eye look, I feel like this paired with some of like the neutral mattes would be just perfect. I will also say that the shimmer that I used today, this teal one down here, it is very shiny and it is sparkly, but it's not on the same level as like this one or this one or this one. I feel like it's in between like this level of sparkle and this level of sparkle, but like not every eyeshadow needs to be super sparkly. Yes, I am a sparkle goblin, but I can appreciate all levels of shine and sparkle, and I feel like this one is so intense and glowy and electric that I don't find the need for it to be super sparkly. Also, this shimmer over here is definitely a standout. It's got that like multicolored sparkle effect to it, and it is so beautiful. I definitely want to do a look with the shadow, and I do have one planned for shorts, so keep an eye out for that. So I mentioned that Arttitude released 5 singles alongside the Arcana palette, and I don't know if the owner has explicitly said this, but I feel like this is a really good strategy to offer more shimmers, since the palettes have less shimmers overall and less special shades, which is a strategy to keep the cost down. And I think that it makes sense because like makeup is just like the prices keep rising, and I totally understand wanting to keep costs low. And I think offering singles on the side makes so much sense because then you can just pick up the ones that you're interested in even though they are, you know, typically more pricey, you're not locked into getting like all of them within the palette. I mentioned that this one up here, Ethereal, is my favorite of all 5 of them because it is just so beautiful and glowy and sparkly at the same time, which I feel like it's hard to do both of those at the same time. I love that it's on a sheer tan base. I feel like it would be such a beautiful one and done on so many different skin tones. And I also like this shade down here, Alchemy. It is a holochrome, and I have seen a holochrome in one of Arttitude's older palettes. I think it's the Urban Neutrals palette, but I wasn't like the biggest fan of that formula. It wasn't bad, but it just like wasn't on the level of some other holochromes that I've seen. But this one is, I think this one is really nice. It's almost like an iridescent, but not quite. I feel like the base does have like a slightly gray quality to it, but I don't feel like that comes from the hollow particles. I feel like it's just a part of the eyeshadow, if that makes sense. All in all, I really enjoyed this release from Arttitude Cosmetics, but I do think that if you are not a fan of super cool tones or really like muted, grayed out eyeshadows, then I don't know if this palette will be for you. If anything, I feel like Metamorph might be a better option. This look is going to be using the Dieverune Dewdrops Part 2 palette, and this is going to be a pretty simple look because this is an all shimmer palette and it's pretty small, so I don't really want to pull in too many additional mattes. And for the mattes, I'm going to be using the Unearthly Gargoyle palette. I'm going to be starting with this shade over here. I'm going to start by just lining my entire eye with this, all the way from inner to outer corner on both the upper and lower lash lines, as you can see over here. This blue is such a good color. It is so rich and vibrant, but it still has like, I mean, it's not like super deep, but it has like enough pigment to it where it's not like going on super washed out. I'm pretty sure I ended up blocking my eye when I did the inner portion because I had to bring the mirror very close to my face, but I'm just going to repeat this entire thing on the lower lash line. Now when I get to this outer edge over here, I have done like a wing in the past, but today I'm going to keep the shape pretty rounded. So I'm just going to take the brush like this and soften it so it doesn't look too harsh over there. After wiping the brush off, I'm going to pick up this lighter blue matte over here. And I'm going to use this to slightly, just ever so slightly smudge out this blue liner with like, I kind of just use a combination of tapping and swiping motions. I really just go off of vibes. And then again, when I get to this outer corner area over here, I just do very light tapping motions because I don't want this to like pull too far out, and repeat on the lower lash line. But here I kind of just do these swiping motions because I have more like powder down here, so I feel like it just does this motion better than it does on the top lid where I just have like my regular eye primer down, and I feel like doing this it sometimes tugs a bit. Now I'm just going to quickly dip back into this shade over here, and I'm just quickly really roughly re-intensifying the lash line. Moving on to the shimmers now, I'm going to pick up this shade Mist, which has a matching blue base. I'm going to be applying this all over my lid, and even though it has a blue base in the pan, you can see I have it all over this lid. It is quite a sheer base, and it doesn't like super show up on my skin tone, but that's what I wanted because I really want there to be like a lot of contrast between this very light and like ethereal shimmer on the lid and this very intense bold blue liner. I love using sheer eyeshadows in this way, but I am using a brush and being careful to build this up in light layers because I don't want it to go on in a very like thick, opaque, metallic type of layer. This eyeshadow has a lot of beautiful multicolored sparkles, and I really want those to stand out, which is why I'm tapping it on to kind of get this dispersed piecey effect on my lid. I'm also tapping it up into my crease because I have deep set eyes, so shimmer always transfers up anyway, and when I do like a bold liner like this all around the eye, I like the shimmer to go all the way up here. But I am avoiding placing it right at the lash line because again, I want that bold blue liner to really pop. I don't really know if you'll be able to see it on camera, but I'm going to tilt my head back like this so light is not hitting my lids, and there is the lightest sheerest wash of blue all over my lids. Not enough to be like super noticeable, but enough to just give like a little bit of something, like some kind of shadow all over the lid so that there's not like nothing you know, between the liner and the sparkle. For the finishing touch, I'm gonna dip into the more purple side of the split pan bubble. This is going in my usual spots in the inner corner, and I am dragging it down over here, even though it's gonna cover a little bit of that liner. Then doing the inner swoop. And this shimmer, I love it so much. It flashes blue, purple, and pink at different angles, but like not consistently because it's like an interesting mix of sparkles without being like an obvious multicolored sparkle effect. But I feel like it's the perfect complement to this look because I didn't want to add even more blue by using this side of the split pan. I wanted it to be like sort of blue, but also bring in like some additional color, and this was perfect for that. Here's the final look. I really love how it turned out. This is a go-to technique for me, especially when I'm in a rush, but also to really highlight shimmers because there isn't really a lot going on with the mattes, and I feel like this smudgy eyeliner really suits my eye shape, first of all, but also just really draws attention to my eyes, which then again turns the attention to the shimmers. So yeah, and the shimmers themselves are very beautiful, so I can't wait to flip you over to the sparkle cam. Here's the sparkle cam, so you can see all of those beautiful multicolored sparkles that I was talking about. And this eyeshadow right now, my eyes remind me of those like disco ball lights from the 90s. They weren't actual disco balls, but they were like these black balls with like little circles on them that had all these different colored lights. I'm doing a terrible job of explaining what they are, but hopefully I'll pop up an image over here so you know what I'm talking about. But yeah, that's what my eyes remind me of right now. Alrighty, let me give you my thoughts on the Dewdrops Part 2 palette. And I feel like I usually start with a color story, but being an all shimmer palette, I don't feel like I can really talk about the color story since I view all shimmer palettes as more like companion palettes, especially when they are this small. What I will say about Part 2 is that there is no overlap with the original Dewdrops palette, and I'll pop up some swatches so you can see them side by side, and just know that like if you were worried about that in any way, there are no repeating shades. I feel like the formulas in here are pretty similar to the original Dewdrops in that there is a mix of true iridescent shades with some sheer shimmers, because like this one, and this one look like they have bases to them, but when you actually swatch them out and apply them on the eyes, I've actually worn all three of these on the eyes by now, the bases don't really show up, so I feel like they're very versatile. You can definitely pair them with plenty of different mattes for different effects. And at least on my skin tone, I do feel like I can use all three of these as well as this one in the inner corner without too much of like a grayish cast or anything, and they work really well over there. Texture-wise, there isn't anything like super flaky or oily or overly emollient in this palette. I find that Dieverune shimmers do have a little bit of emollients to them, but not like an excessive amount. I don't experience any creasing from them, but you know, your experience may vary because I just tend to not get creasing in general. But I find that the emollients in these eyeshadows really helps them like stick down on top of mattes, which I think is especially important with sheer and iridescent shimmers like this if you are going to be wearing them over mattes all over the lid or anything like that. Texture-wise, this one over here has the largest particle size, but I have worn it all over the lid and it smooths out very easily. I didn't have any issues with it. And then this one up here is very similar to Bella Beauté Bar's Skin of a Killer. Like color-wise, they are pretty much identical. It has like an icy white sparkle just like that, but texture-wise, it is close to Skin of a Killer, the eyeshadow version, not the highlighter version, which to me has a smaller particle size. But the difference is, like there's a slight difference in formula because I feel like this one, the particles stick to each other a bit more, especially when you try to like shear it out versus Skin of a Killer, which I feel like can be sheared out really well to make like an excellent topper. I feel like this one just takes like a little bit more effort to shear out in that way. I also personally really love a split pen because I think like you're getting more shades for the price of one basically. And I know it's not everyone's cup of tea, but like for me at least, I have so much eyeshadow in my collection and I feel like a lot of indie makeup lovers also have a lot of eyeshadow. So like you're not at risk of like running through it unless, I don't know, this is like the only special shimmer palette that you have, which if you don't have any special shimmers and you're looking to pick one up, I do think that this is an excellent palette for that. The price is pretty steep at $62 for 6 eyeshadows, but I think you have to keep in mind that these are all special shadows. Like they're either multi-chromes or this one has that like very special Skin of a Killer type texture. These two have multicolored sparkles in there. So considering that most special shadows go for like between $15 to $18 a pop, I do think that $62 makes sense for this, and you can use a code to bring that price down. All in all, I do really like this launch from Dieverune, and I think it's so smart to launch like just like a little curated palette of special shimmers for people who maybe don't want to pick up like single shadows, because not everyone is a single shadow person. For this look, I'm going to be using the Gourmande Girls Mocha Moment palette, and I've already done a look with this using some of the more like cool tones and like this burgundy down here and the pink shimmer. So for this look, I'm going to focus on more of like the green, gold, neutral tones in the palette. And I'm starting with this beautiful matcha green matte over here. I feel like this green matte is the brightest and most unexpected shade in the palette, and at first, it doesn't make sense because it's like, how is this neutral and how is this coffee themed? But it's a matcha inspired shade. The shade name is Matcha Mocha, which I don't know if I've ever had like a matcha with chocolate in it. I feel like it's mostly done with fruit flavors in it, but I don't know, maybe that exists out there somewhere. I dipped back in a third time because even though I know how this built and blended over there, which was very well, I just like to work in thin layers. So that's why I dipped back in, and yeah, this matte is actually building and blending so beautifully and easily. I feel like I barely have to blend the edges to get like a non-harsh edge over here, but that could also be because of my olive undertone. Like greens just tend to work really well on me. I'm also running this on my lower lash line really quickly, where it's also building pretty well. I feel like usually, I say this all the time, but shades don't build up as well on my lower lash line sometimes because I have a lot of powder down here from setting my concealer, but this shade is showing up like pretty much as vibrantly as it shows up top, which I feel like is hard since, especially on my eye shape, my eyes are very deep set both on the top and like bottom half, and so sometimes shadows will look extra shadowy down here, if that makes sense. To deepen up the outer corner, I'm going to pick up this matte over here. This matte is a lot more neutral than the other green matte, and you can see on me it's kind of applying as just like a proper neutral, but again, I have that olive undertone, and this is like a very deep olive leaning green matte, so on me it really is just gonna look like a neutral deepening up shade. I do really like how it combines with this green matte. I feel like it helps ground the look a little bit more, makes it more neutral overall. And I don't know if I mentioned already, I don't think I did, but this is gonna be a relatively simple look since this is supposed to be like a spicy neutral palette, and that's how I would use a palette like that. Right now, I'm just focusing on softening up this edge over here, blending it a little bit, and also blending it with the matcha green matte. Now I picked up the same dark matte on a smaller pencil brush, and I'm going to run it on the outer edge of my lower lash line over here. Picked up a little bit more on the same brush, and I'm going to pack that over here, bringing it up onto the lid to re-intensify this matte, give it more depth, but keep it very, very precise. I don't really want to blend, like I don't want the depth to go all the way out here. I just want it to remain soft out here. Now I'm going to pick up this shimmer over here because I feel like between this shimmer over here and this one down here, the one at the top that I want to use is slightly more gold toned than the one at the bottom, which is a bit more neutral, but they are incredibly similar, and I feel like one of these should have been switched out with a green shimmer to go with the green mattes, because you can see they swatch out a bit more differently. You can see the gold a lot better here, and this one's a bit more neutral, but I just feel like they're so close and one of them should have been different. So the shimmer that I'm going to be using on my lid is Biscotti with Mocha, and since this one is slightly more gold yellow toned than the other shimmer, I felt like it would go better with these green mattes, and the texture on the shimmer is bonkers. It is so reflective and metallic when you build it up, but at the same time it has these like dazzling, almost like silver sparkles throughout it, and I feel like it gives it a bit of a twist to the shadow and keeps it from being just a plain gold leaning metallic shade. Like it gives it a lot of dimension, I think. look. And the shadow is a bit more on the textured side, which, by the way, that other shimmer that I showed you has a very similar texture, and that's the other reason I feel like it should have been more different, since it's not even texturally different. But yeah, this shimmer does have a little texture, so I think you need to work just like the tiniest bit carefully with it so that you don't get any fallout and that you don't put too much on your lid, because I do feel like this is one of those shimmers where you can risk putting too much on and then that can make your eye look a little crepey. So it's best to work in very like thin layers with this, I think. So for my inner corner, I really wanted to use one of the shimmers that I haven't used already, but the only two shimmers that I haven't used are this one over here, which, like I said, is too similar to differentiate it from what I have on my lid, and this one down here, which is a very dark shimmer when mixed up, so I feel like I personally just don't want to use a dark shimmer in my inner corner, which really only leaves this shimmer and this shimmer, but both of these are ones that I already used in my other look using this palette, so I'm kind of at a loss as to what to use in my inner corner. I'm just gonna go ahead and use this shimmer in my inner corner because in my other look using this palette, I used this one in the inner corner and this one on the lid. So let me give this a shot in the inner corner. So after doing the other eye, I'm actually pretty happy that I went with this one for the inner corner for a couple of reasons. First of all, this is a shifty shadow and it shifts from a pink to a green, so with a gold in between. So I feel like it really does complement the colors that I have going on already. Like it'll flow well into the green matte, the gold shift will complement this, but then the pink shift that's straight on will just give some like contrast and variety to the look. And then the other reason is that this shimmer has a very small particle size in contrast to what I have on my lid, which is just like a little bit, I don't want to say chunky because it doesn't look chunky on my lid, but it does have a larger particle size, so it's more like glittery, I guess, and I just prefer smaller particle shimmers for my inner corner area. Here's the final look, which I'm very happy with. I feel like it really is balanced between being colorful and neutral because you have this vibrant green matte in the crease, but then a neutral shimmer on the lid, a neutral smoky outer corner, but then a pink shimmer in the inner swoop, so it really is kind of this like half and half type of look. I am so excited to show you the sparkle cam for this look because hopefully you'll be able to see just how molten and glittery this lid shimmer is, even though it isn't actually glitter. It is so freaking sparkly, and then hopefully you can see those like silver sparkles throughout the bronzy gold base that give it that dimension I was talking about. And then lastly, I want to point out the inner swoop shade over here. You can see the hollow particles a bit better in this light, and you can also see it shifting as I move my head, which is pretty cool. Now let's talk about this palette as a whole, and I want to start with the matte selection because I adore this matte selection so much. This is probably as close to my ideal neutral slash spicy neutral that you can get to specifically for the mattes, because you do have some like true neutral mattes over here. And I will say really quickly, I wish that this matte was just a touch darker because this one I can still use on my skin tone, and I love that it has a lot of yellow in it. That really works as like a blending out shade for me. But this one I wish it was just like slightly deeper and a bit more cool toned. But then with the other more like colorful mattes, like I love a cool toned purpley pink shade, a dusty purple matte, a brown that has a lot of pink in it, and then this burgundy matte over here, all tones that I love to wear on a day-to-day basis. And then the other type of like sort of colorful, sort of neutral mattes that I like to wear are olivey green shades. So this one and this one, adore them as well. This one, for my preferences, I would have made maybe like a touch more neutral than how vibrant it is over here, but I do understand that it's like a matcha inspired shade, so it has to be as bright as it is. I actually just had a thought. I really want to try mixing this matcha green shade over here with either this matte or this matte to try to make it a bit more murky, like that olive tone that I really crave in my neutral palettes. And this one will probably keep it on the lighter side. It'll lighten it up a little bit, and this one might make it a bit deeper and more grungy, and I'm really curious to see how that would work. And of course, I love that we have multiple deepening up options because I really like to do, like, I would say probably mostly monochromatic matte blends on a day-to-day basis. Like, I'll do other types of blends here and there and for looks on camera, but for like my quick daily out the door looks, I want to like turn my brain off, and that's how I like to use neutral palettes. And for that, I mostly like to do like a lighter matte and then a darker matte, but in a monochromatic scheme. So this palette I feel like makes it really easy to do that. The matte quality is also very, very good. I did not have any issues with the mattes between both of my looks. And I have found with some other Gourmande Girl palettes, like the Call of the Sirens one, some of the brighter mattes, or yeah, I guess the brighter, more saturated mattes can have like a slightly different formula in the pastels as well. But since this palette is full of like pretty neutral mattes, the formula is very easy to work with, very middle of the road, very like creamy but not too powdery, and just like it's pigmented but it's easy to blend and sheer out, which is just like, that's perfect for me. Now where I find this palette lacking for my preferences is the shimmer selection. I do like that there are 5 shimmers, and so this is, I guess you could say that it's a matte heavy palette, which I think is fine. I don't think that 5 shimmers is too little, but I feel like the variety in tone could have been worked on, because like I pointed out with these two, I just felt like they're too similar to be in the palette. I really like this one for a cool toned option, but then the other 2 shimmers both lean like pinky purpley, and since we do have green mass in the palette, I just wish that one of these shimmers would have been a bit more green leaning. And between the 2 pink shimmers, I do really like this one that I used on my inner corner slash swoop today, and I've used it all over my lid in my other look using this palette. I really like it. It's very sparkly, but has a small particle size, so it's very smooth, and I think that is a formula that a lot of people will get along with. And I will say for the hollow particles, they are a bit on the smaller side, so they're not always the most visible if you are just in like regular lighting. I feel like you have to be in pretty bright direct lighting for the hollow particles to show up, but they don't make the shadow gray or anything like that, and I think it's a really well done holochrome. And then this shimmer down here, there's nothing wrong with it, but you can see that it's a bit on the deeper side, and it's also not as sparkly as the other shimmers, so I don't mind a darker shimmer or a less sparkly shimmer. I like to use those for layering or just like on the outer corner if they're really deep. But since there are only 5 shimmers in this palette, and the way in which I use darker or less sparkly shimmers is a bit limited, I feel like I just won't get as much use out of this shimmer, and so it makes the palette overall more like there's less variety in it, if that makes sense. I also want to point out that this shimmer over here has the same texture as these two, so it has that like ultra metallic, dazzling, super sparkly, almost glitter-like level of sparkle, which makes it very intense, which I enjoy. But I do want to point it out because I know that a lot of people who enjoy neutrals prefer like a bit more subdued types of shimmer, so these might be too much for you if that is your preference, but if you're like me and you love super sparkly shimmers, then you'll love them. As far as the theme goes, it's really cute, Mocha Moment, and in case you don't know, mochas are coffees with chocolate, so I feel like you have to take that theme with a grain of salt when it comes to the color story, because not all of these really make sense. Like I talked about matcha mocha, I don't know if it should be this much of a vibrant green if the matcha has coffee in it, and like this is peppermint mocha, but I don't know how this shade could be that, or this being like a dusty purple shade being cafe mocha, just like things like that where I think like the theme is just like, you know, take it with a grain of salt. But as far as the palette goes as a whole, I really do love it, even though I don't love the shimmer selection entirely. There are enough shimmers that I do like, and personally I don't mind pairing this with another palette or bringing in a few special single shadows to fill in the gaps of things. And I think I said previously, this is as close to my perfect neutral, spicy neutral as a brand could get, I think. Alright, that's it for this video. Please don't forget to give the video a like before you go, and let me know in the comments which of these palettes was your favorite and which of the looks was your favorite as well, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!